Call the meeting to order for Wicomico County Budget Work Session for May 28, 2024. I think the question was raised earlier, Pam, when you were talking about
Yeah.
the...
So in Pam Olin, Finance Director. So in the schedule that Anjali provided to you guys, I did want to state that on the revenue adjustments column, the first number is too large. It should be $1,743,686. With that change, you also do not need the $37 on the schedule. So those two numbers need to be adjusted.
That was 1,700,000 and
1,743,686.
4, 3, 6.
Because that number takes into account the 37. On the, going down the left-hand side, Salisbury Fire, that is what it is. Salaries capped at 5%. I'm trying to understand your note on corrections. Did you leave corrections at the numbers that we placed in the system?
Yeah, so Anjali Chattel, internal auditor, the formula that I used for emergency service, for corrections and emergency was if their raise was under 8.01% to not touch it. Basically, what that resulted in was that no council changes were made to corrections at all unless it was a vacancy cut. So
Okay, so corrections stayed at what was on the scale that we had provided.
correct, because all the raises were under 8.01%.
Okay. That's fine. And then FOP and state's attorney got put at the numbers that they were put in at.
Yeah, I exempted those departments.
Okay.
I just have a question about that. For a council that is really concerned about employee morale, it keeps getting brought up on different aspects. You took care of the sheriff's office and you took care of the state's attorney, but there were some changes that we made to make sure we keep our employees, but had no problem cutting those. So if you could help me maybe come up with what I should tell my employees on why the state's attorney gets her raises, which I think they are deserved, but our employees don't.
And there were, on the list that I sent to both Laura and Anjali, there were a handful on the list that are not department head, not deputy directors. There are a handful of key employees within departments that we're asking for council to leave at the raises that we put in there because those people have been already offered positions elsewhere at higher dollar amounts than we're even offering them in this budget, but they would like to work for us. And I'm asking the council to consider that and allow those changes to stay in here because we will be losing good employees.
As far as the directors and deputy directors, I mean, you all got this. This was sent to you. This was Maryland Association of Counties, County Employee Salaries. We are last, or second to last, for all of our directors and deputy directors. So even the raises that I proposed, which I know a lot of them were high, I understood that, but they are underpaid. Pam could go work at Worcester County for $170,000. Now, granted, is it a larger budget? Absolutely. But it's still a finance director position. So when I ask our director of finance to move her salary from $114,000 to $130,000, you know, I have a hard time accepting that. I understand why, and I understand that cuts had to be made, but all of the directors and the deputy directors, while I think they deserve that, if you all don't think they do, that's okay, but they want their employees taken care of. So if you want to cut theirs, fine, and if you can keep, you know, the employees that Pam said, that's fine. We don't want to lose these people. So.
I think the issue is really, it wasn't that long ago that the finance director and executive sat before us with a Bolton study and said, this is exactly how it has to be. And we paid a lot of money for the study.
Right, but we didn't follow the study.
There were not, well, we did it for about a year and a half we did.
But John,
Well, let me
sorry, go
ask
ahead,
my
finish.
question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. So We recognize that, and all of a sudden, it was very unfortunate that we had one individual where a request was made for an astronomical increase. And it's kind of the same thing here. We recognize that, and we recognize the importance, but we think maybe it needs to be done on a more graduated basis as opposed to saying, you're getting 20% right now. And when you try to tell your employees, well, these are individuals who are, because a lot of individuals making well over $100,000 were getting raises in 18, 20% increases. While you had other employees getting 6%. So that's how you try to balance out, employee morale, I think, to a certain extent.
I understand, but when the Bolton study was done, if we're going to go back that far, this council did not agree with the grade that Ms. Hurley was given, knowing the job that she does. And so she went down and talked it out, and the grade was given because the council has the power to do that. And there have been times throughout the years that the council has given raises to its employees when the rest of the county got nothing. And that's just facts. And the thing is that your employees do deserve those raises, and our employees do too. And if it's too much, we will look at kind of getting them caught up. It is better for somebody like Chris Hopkins, and I know his raise was astronomical. I think it was $71,000 to almost $100,000. But a deputy director of emergency services should be making anywhere between $100,000 to $120,000. And I get it to do it incrementally. But at the end of the day, Chris Hopkins would be better to quit and then reapply, and then he could negotiate his salary. That doesn't make sense.
Rather not discuss individual employees at all, but
No, but they're
again,
all online.
It's a broader perspective, and I think it's simple, a broader perspective. To answer your question, is that we felt that those numbers are absolutely astronomical, and we did the same thing when we lost an employee. I guess it was last year, or the year before last. We actually felt that the administration should never have suggested such astronomical increases when they could have talked to those individuals or those department heads one-on-one and said, look, we recognize where you need to be, but this is going to be tough all in 1 year. So let's look at maybe a 2-year or 3-year plan, and that's an incentive to move forward and also to make those corrections. I feel like that's probably what is the best way to try to go with this. But that's the council's perspective on it.
So,
It's just not
again,
HR's.
I am not arguing for the directors and deputy directors at this moment. That is not what I'm arguing for.
Right.
I'm arguing for about 6 employees that were on the list that I provided that are frontline staff within departments. And if council wants to take steps, just giving them the same scale raise as everybody else, the 5%, doesn't get us there. It does not get us to the number that we are looking for those employees to try to retain those employees. Again, I don't have my computer in front of me. I should have brought it up with me today, and I did not. I can easily run downstairs and unplug it and get it back up here. But I was trying to pull it up on my phone, and I can't. But again, it's about 6 employees. I think they were highlighted in a color.
Well, let me
and I
address
can't
that
remember
for
which
you.
color
Right.
that was.
I think what I've done, because I had this conversation with Laura this morning, is and we wanted to check with Mr. Benson and all to make sure it was even, whether we were allowed to do that. But it's possible that we could review in a closed session. I don't like talking about people's salaries in open session.
It's by title. So again, because there's only a few people and those people know their titles, I would never say their name.
Right, but I would rather, honestly, because it may get into the details, and I think we were looking for some type of a document, because I made a note, and some of it, we're looking for a position description questionnaire, which we don't have, which would really help in regard to
They
that,
were
but,
all provided.
okay.
Seen that.
I didn't get, it would have been sent to you from Donna.
Did it come directly from Donna?
Yes.
Okay, I'll double check.
Okay,
So-
but I would think maybe it's something that we could do in a closed session, and that way we could delve into it a little more carefully.
That is
To-
fine.
to make that
Again,
decision.
it is, as you're aware, the document is, the position control document is a public document. It does not have names, it has titles. I will readily admit, there are 3, 4 finance people on that list. I have had one of those people come to me and say, I've been offered another job. And
In Dorchester.
so we have talked with that person. They have agreed to currently stay. But if the next job opportunity comes along and all we're going to provide them is 5%, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to keep them. And these are key positions to keeping my department and other departments running. So again, I'm requesting council to take a look at the file that I provided. And again, it does not have any deputy directors. It does not have any directors. It literally has frontline employees that I am asking, and it is not going to impact these numbers significantly, but it is going to impact the work of this council, or this county significantly, if we lose those.
Did you supply us a list with those specific?
I provided it
Picture
to,
here. Here, do you have? That I do. And it is on your table.
So it's on the table, okay.
Yeah.
Which one is it?
Is this it, Pam?
no, that's the vacancy position. It is the, yes, it's that one.
Top one with the color coded?
So it is the positions that are in orange are positions that we are specifically requesting. There is one position
This one, Joe.
in emergency services that is more than 8%. There is,
All right, hang on, Pam, we gotta make sure we're all looking at the same thing, because I can't find it.
It's the one that has my name at the top with the email.
says February 24th at 5:02 PM.
Got it.
Hold on.
Yeah.
We have,
So if you scroll through this about 4 pages in, 5 pages in,
What's this?
you'll see the first orange.
got that?
And then there's 3 more on page 6.
Gotcha.
There is 1 on page 9, 1 on page 10. And those are the positions that have been specifically requested by departments, not counting the positions that we still haven't talked about on Schedule E, but very specific positions. Their titles aren't changing, but based on their
Circumstances.
well, not just circumstances. Again, the Bolton study looked at people based on how long they had been in that specific job. And I don't care, I'll say myself. When Bolton study happened, I'd been in my job a year. So all it looked at is said that I was a finance director for 1 year. Doesn't take into the account that I was a CFO of a health insurance company, a vice president of a company, and the finance director for the city of Salisbury. It took none of that into account when placing me on the scale. For certain employees, same thing happened. It did not look at history beyond when they were promoted into their position. Did not look at their skill set beyond that. That was one flaw associated with the Bolton study. I will readily admit, I sat up here and I advocated for the Bolton study. But I advocated for what I was asked to advocate for, knowing that we had to take a point in time and do something. And so we are now asking for specific accommodations for about 6 employees, 7 employees. And again, not a department head, not a deputy director. We're asking for these employees to try to retain them for our community and our county.
Any questions, where, yeah, James?
I was going to say, for the 6, would we be able to, I'm speaking to everyone here, compromise, maybe not the 20%, maybe not just 5%, maybe 10%, just to step them up?
And if council wants to do that, I would prefer not, but it's better than just leaving them at 5%.
Right.
So if council is willing to take them part of the way this year and let us then bring them back again next year, I would, again, basically if we could have, if you wanted to have their increases, I could live with that. I would prefer not, but it's better than just doing 5% for them.
Right.
We do half? Like, could we do half the year and then do the other half? Like, so that way it's not being funded the entire year?
That's
if they
another
got half
option
of it,
is
so-
that they could get a first full pay period in July, half of it, and then the rest of it, the first full pay period in January. So it would take them all the way up there in the year. That's another option. It would save you a quarter of the cost.
My concern is, I don't want other people in other departments not to think that we don't care about them as much. Now, we've talked about corrections. Corrections is hurting. We're not going to touch their proposed budget. Sheriff's Department, they're getting increases if the contract goes through. Now, we're picking and choosing certain people in other areas to give them more than 5%. It's concerning to me how that's going to be viewed.
What about the state's attorney? You've allowed her to choose whatever she wants for her salaries,
Well, to
which
answer-
rightfully so, but I'm just saying, like, then you've got the state's attorney too, so it's almost like,
Actually, I left them out. My apologies.
That's state law.
attorney.
I think. isn't
no,
it?
just for
No,
her, not
just
for her
hers,
employees.
not her employees.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's correct.
No, it is, the state law is
They're county
her.
employees.
Yeah, so,
We,
not legal advice, maybe I should defer to Bob, but just there's and this is what Jamie provided to me. Title 15, Office of the State's Attorney, Subtitle 4, County-wide Provisions, 15-423, specifically titled Wicomico County or subtitled Wicomico County. B2, after receiving a voucher submitted by the state's attorney, the county council shall pay all expenses of the state's attorney considers necessary for the conduct of the office, including clerical and secretarial expenses, telephone charges, office supplies, postage, and premiums on official bonds.
Does not include her attorneys in that list, though.
I didn't hear salary.
It just says clerical.
So that's what I was provided, and that was,
So again, we have consistently come and supported the state's attorney in her request. That's why we have put her numbers in here at the request that she has put. She is an elected official. Her salary is set by state law. It's an amount based on a judge's salary. We have to do a percentage of that. Her salary is in there at that. The rest of her employees, she specifically came to us and said, this is what I want to pay my employees, and we have presented that to you.
well, to answer the question, really, I mean, we restored that because we were very concerned, same reason with the sheriff or corrections or emergency services, we're very concerned about public service and public safety. And I think we recognize that especially with the state's attorney's office, if they don't have enough attorneys, or it's a very fine-tuned machine right now, and we were afraid to really make too many changes to that because once somebody is arrested, they have only so many days where they have to prosecute and they have to execute.
And that's the reason why we provided
So-
the numbers as
Right. Well,
requested.
that has been restored, so we're okay with this.
Okay.
But the
and-
finance of the county is just as important in a different way.
Anything we do is going to offend one party or another. So we're trying to find the best balance when we can, and that's why we're saying with public
I am
safety.
imploring you to look at these 6, 7 employees, and it is not just finance, it is multiple departments that have requested specific dollar amounts to avoid losing key members of their staff.
Yeah, I think it's very well thought out. What's the council's take on, looking for
So
some type of a compromise here?
we've got people at the landfill operating million-dollar equipment, making the same money that they can make at Dunkin' Donuts. That's a problem.
Okay.
I would support a 5% raise across the board and an 8% raise to the other folks, not corrections. They stay where they are. But the folks that are getting these 17, 20, 30% raises, they get 8% this year. And we revisit it again next year.
Everybody
We
okay?
we can't make this huge jump all at once. It's going to create a morale issue somewhere in the picture. And people that are saying, if you don't pay me more money, I'm going to leave, welcome to the world. You're going to get that no matter what. We absolutely don't want them to leave. Absolutely do not want that. But you're never going to stop that from happening. Never.
And maybe you can help me with this, but I've always seemed to have a little bit of a problem with it. We're talking about a 5% raise. We're talking about steps, but nobody seems to put that together. So you're not getting a 5% raise, you're getting 5% plus your step,
No.
right?
No, you're getting a 4% raise,
Plus,
and you're moving 1% on the scale. So the scale moved up 4%, and everybody's moving over on the scale 1%. What we're asking for is for these people to move, the scale moved up 4%, and for some of them, we're asking for them to move, 16%, 13%. Could we take their numbers and divide them in half? So some are getting 17, some are getting 20. Could we do half of their number so that it potentially, depending on next year, could be a two-step process?
I think that's fair. Josh?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have a current policy of how often we do salary reviews. I think the Bolton one's the only one we've done since I've been here, but I do want to get us to a point where it doesn't feel so piecemeal, like where we're picking winners and losers. It'd be best if this were more categorical or, a plan over time to say, okay, if we go for these folks this year, then, have agreement between the council and executive by year 2 or 3, this is where these folks will be. So it can give some sort of assurance, but it feels a bit disjointed just to acknowledge that. The more that we can get to a point where everyone feels comfortable and they know where they're at, I think the better.
If I may,
Sure.
I'd like to answer. So in the 11 years I've been with the county, we've done 2 studies. One was not implemented completely, and that was back Singer 7-8 years ago. It was very much picked and choose as to which departments, which positions, which titles were allowed to get raises. And then the statement made was, well, we'll do the rest the next year. The rest never came. So we did the Bolton study 2.5, 3 years ago now. Yes, any study is flawed at the date it is issued, because it is always history, not projection. Again, I'm asking, can we for these cut it in half?
Yeah, I think we should defer to you, Pam, on this. I really do. I think we would cut it in half, a minimum of 8, because in some instances it may go below 8 if you cut it in half.
Yeah,
So-
that's fine.
Because I don't want to micromanage, what you have a greater pulse, I think, on these what do you say, the six individuals?
Let me go through and count and make sure, because I've been
Well,
fluctuating.
okay.
Can I ask a
While she's doing
I
that.
support, I support if we wanted to even have a higher raise than 5% across the board. But I'm not going to support just picking and choosing different people. I mean, to me, the county employees, they all deserve a raise. They all deserve the increase, and I'm not going to pick and choose. So I can't support just picking and choosing. I support if they want to increase it to 6% across the board, but
The challenge of that, of course, is that for so long, we've had people we didn't get that first raise 7 years ago, maybe touch and go at the Bolton study, but looking through the Mako report was a couple weeks ago, and then, of course, they sent around another one again today with the updated report from DLS or from Mr. Mako. But either way, we undoubtedly have multiple positions, including in finance, that are underfunded, that are not market rate. So I don't know how we get to that point where we can feel very confident that these are market rate salaries. And of course, we couldn't do anything about the inflation jump of 7%, 2 years ago or whatever that was. But yeah.
So, yes, there is 6.
Okay.
And we would, 4 of them we would have, and one is 8%, and they'd get the 8%, and the other is 9%. Council, do you want me to do 8.5? Because it would have or do 9?
There's one on here that's 21%,
As I said, I would have that.
so that would be 10.5%.
Yeah.
Saw one with 37.
Yeah, but I think that was,
That's, the percentages are 20, 17, 20, 21.
we're not going to get, we're not, I understand what you're saying, Shane, and that's why we've tried to stay with the 5%, but it's not going to be a perfect system.
it's not going to be perfect. But you talk about a morale killer.
I don't know. Well, I don't know about that. I think what we're trying to do is come as close as we possibly can, and we recognize that you are going to have to make some exceptions. Yes, Angie?
I had a question. So this morning, I was asked by John, in preparing this, to ignore salaries that are under 60,000, where the proposed salary is under 60,000, to ignore that capping of the 5% in this document. So one of these positions that Pam has mentioned, the tax coordinator, for instance, that's no longer being cut because the proposed salary amount was 56,000. So when you're making your decision today, if you could clarify if there's maybe some, for lower salaries that are under a certain amount, if it's going to be this half thing, so it would be 8% or, I can't think on my feet sometimes, 8.5% for the tax coordinator, or if I'm completely not, or she's completely not cutting it because it's under that 60,000 amount.
Again, I am happy, let me rephrase that. Happy is not the word. I would go along with if we could do these 6 and do as much as we could. If half is the number, it would put them all between 8 and 10.5%.
Joe, were you going to say anything?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to tell you what I think of this. I'm going to tell you what I've heard. And I hear mostly from employees that are on the lower part of the pay scale. And, you know, when you have somebody making $30,000 or $40,000 a year and they're going to get a 5% raise, but you have somebody making, you know, $70,000 or $80,000 or $90,000 a year and they're going to get a 17 or 18% or even a 10%. That creates a lot of contention, a lot of ill feelings. And that's why when this council first started talking about what were we going to do with raises, I think the majority said, okay, we're going to do 5%, except for corrections. What was the other? Sheriff, of course.
Sheriff's office, corrections, and
And I thought we'd all settled on that because we thought we were being very fair. You know, everybody wants more money, but I want to go back to the recession and when we had to do RIFs. That's a reduction in force. I walked into one of, pardon me?
And furloughs.
And furloughs. We had to do furloughs too. I walked into one of the offices here in the building, and you know, you wonder whether you're welcome, I guess is a good word to put it. And one of the young ladies working there said, you know, I plan on retiring from Wicomico County, and I know this is a tough decision on you, but I'd rather see the county survive than have to give us a raise this year like we didn't get one last year. And, you know, what we do today doesn't just affect this year's budget. It affects budgets next year and the year after. You're always going to have somebody that's going to say, if I don't get more money, I'm going to leave. We've had that before. We'll have it in the future. We might do 8% or 10% here, and they still leave. You know, so
Yes, they may.
I think being fair, you know, we've talked about this. You know, I'm going to stay where we were at. Is where I'm going to be.
It will cost us more than the 8% that I'm asking to train those people that could walk out the door.
It goes on
And
all the
also,
time.
when we have to hire a new person, they can negotiate their salary. So we'll end up paying the same amount anyway. They'll come in and ask for more money, and because when new employees come in, we take their experience into consideration, so we're going to pay that amount anyway.
That's up to you.
Well, no, I mean, but that's what they're going to negotiate for because that's the going rate. So we're
Well,
going to end up paying it
Or we have
regardless.
the position vacant, and then we have a hole in the departments that are being requested. Again, I'm asking council, I have stated my case, council has the decision at this moment.
Mr. President. I just want council to know that we did get the position description questionnaires. Looks like Corey just sent it at 3:21, and then Donna sent one at 3:33. I'm assuming it's the same information, just sent at,
I don't,
yeah, if you could just verify that, Bunky, if you don't mind. And they also sent an updated vacancy report that came in at 3:21 as well.
vacancy report that I have provided to council has the current ones
So it's the same as the one Corey just sent? Okay.
Yeah,
great.
I have confirmed that with payroll as of Friday. So my numbers are up to date as of Friday on the vacancy report.
And then just real quick, I know that when the Bolton study was discussed, there was some discussion about having a performance component added to that.
Not gotten to that point yet. We need to get there, but it's not there yet.
Not there yet, okay, but you're considering it?
Yes.
Okay. I think that would help, just to help boost that employee morale.
It's,
That's why
the problem is that it would be, a performance section is fantastic, except for the point, the conversation that is had here is, well, somebody who is only going to get a 5 versus an 8 versus a 10, well, that's not fair. I'm stating that in general. So again, a performance one is much, much harder to implement and much, much harder to then convince whatever powers are in place that what we're doing is as objective versus subjective as possible.
Plus, that's more of a Donna question anyway.
And so,
we
anyways.
could bring her up if we needed to.
I've heard 2 no's. I don't know what the others are.
And I have just for the record, I don't have a problem with increasing it from 5 to 6, or however that looked, for everybody. I understand we can't do that for the sheriff's office because they're under contract. I understand we were told that as bad a shape that corrections was in, we really needed to do something to help them.
The problem is that 1% across the county is a whole lot more money than 3%, 8%, 9% for 6 employees. I understand that. We're balancing that out. I've put in a request, and I'm asking.
I've received phone calls just like Joe has about people seeing these increases, some of them astronomical in my opinion, and I'm for keeping it the same. There's gonna be a lot of offended people.
Is there just for clarity, I guess, is there a floor to this, I guess, or in this conversation? I mean, some of these big jumps, roads I'm looking at or others percentage-wise are still not making, anywhere near 55,000 or something, where many of them probably should be. So they're on the lower end as a whole. I think those kind of folks, it'd be better to see them.
I mean, if we start doing that, then you have to look at compression across all job grades and all, again,
Yeah, that's compression.
there is 6 titles in front of council to make a decision.
Yeah, allowing for wage, and I know there's 6 positions, and yeah, and we'll address that first, because I do want to come back to what Joe just touched on, or Josh, I think. So, in reference to the 6 individuals, and where are we on that, James? Trying to get a consensus.
If you're compromising at 8, you won't go above 8 for some of these employees?
I think the options on the table are to cut it in half, or I suggested making it 8%, which is the same increment that corrections and the emergency services got.
Cutting it in half with an 8% minimum, is that correct?
Correct,
Well,
yeah.
I think what Jeff had stated originally was that the maximum anyone would get would be 8%. The other
Yeah.
option was that the increase be a minimum of 8% or cut in half.
But
Yes, correct.
where are we going to make this up at in the budget? Do we have it? Do we have enough in there?
There is
I
sufficient.
think we can, depending on maybe our end game, we'll get to that later, but I think we can, it's minimal.
Yeah.
I think,
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with cutting it in half.
Josh.
well, I'm just saying that if it sounds like 2 proposals, but if there was the minimum of 8% or up to half, I think that's fair and reasonable.
Yeah. I think the proposal is cut it in half with a minimum of 8%.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
So-
Joe? No. Jeff, I guess you are. Shane?
No.
All right, I'm okay with that, so we do have a consensus to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. The other issue is, and the reason I talked to Angie about this earlier, is I understand wage compression and all that stuff, but I was thinking in some instances where you are suggesting like let's say a 15% increase. In some instances, and I'll have to probably better prepare this for the council members because we're not going to be able to make this decision today. But the reason that I had asked Angie about that is because you have some instances where it's more than a 5% increase. Let's say it's a 7% increase, right? It's a 7% increase. And he said, no, it has to be a 5. But that 7% increase is moving someone from 38,000 to 40,000. So the reality is that person is still making $20 an hour. So I don't think that's appropriate to make that type of a cut. So initially I said to Angie, okay, if it's anybody that's in the salary range of 60,000 or less, let's see how we can, try to go along with what's been recommended. It may be that council wants to do something where we think that's a more fair process for 50,000 or less or 40,000 or less. And I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this.
Right.
So I can go back and revise my Exhibit F with whatever number you want on that. And that would impact those that are in yellow, just so you know, on my schedule. And I don't know, and I am going to ask one more thing, is that vacant positions that don't get cut, can we still fund those at the midpoint? So some of those look like significant changes, but those are actually vacant positions. So again, that gives us flexibility to allow to hire somebody who has experience up to the midpoint without coming back to council for a budget amendment. And so, again, in my Exhibit F, there are some that that are green, and they are not the departments that have been previously stated because we have funded the vacant position at midpoint. So your first question is I can go back and look at the yellows and say these would be under 60,000 or under 50,000, whichever council is interested in, or not. Leave them at the 5%. The yellow is ones that are changing. I'm asking for some of the greens that have the words vacant or vacant at midpoint to stay, to allow us to be able to allow our department heads have flexibility in hiring. And again, I would still take into consideration whichever ones you had stated on the vacant cut list.
Do we know the ones that are marked vacant? Do we know how long they've been vacant?
Well, and that's on your vacant cut list, and that is the discussion. I had come up with a different number than what Anjali did. I came up with, and that's the one that Shane was saying he was having a hard time reading. So, yes, that one.
Oh,
I printed it
got it.
on bigger paper, so that's the one he was saying was harder to read.
For the
But-
record, I can read it
Okay. I can read it with my glasses. I can't read it without.
with no glasses.
So, I'm blind in both directions. I am nearsighted and.
I can't read this. I don't even know what it says.
I'll decipher it for you.
So, on that vacancy report, it has been updated. There are 3 positions that have actually, there are 5 positions. 2 of them have actually been removed from this report because they have since been hired. There are 3 more positions that have been hired since the last report council got, and those are marked with the X and highlighted, and then council also said, do not remove the public works director. So there's 4 positions I'm backing out of the total that's in the fiscal '25 budget. I came up with a $1 million number when you back those 4 positions out. And then there's FICA on top of that. If you then also cut every single one of those positions, there's also another $310,000 associated with health insurance, that if we're not going to hire the employee, there's not going to be health insurance for that employee. Vacant positions, we made the decision to put them in the budget with a parent-child rate to allow us to have the ability to fund if somebody came in with a family. So I don't exactly know from what Anjali has given here as to which ones council, because her number is $200,000 different than mine.
I got this, I think late Friday night or early today, and I cut them already in the document I gave you today, and then it rolled into this. So those three positions that you said are filled are not, the cut's been removed for those, as well as all the state's attorney positions and that public director.
Okay, so you've removed, the additional cuts are the 84,000 and the 90,000 for the state's attorney.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so let me see if that math works. $26.
Would we
Yes, I
get-
come to the same number, so.
Okay.
Does that still have the 911 specialist on there?
It does have, and then again, in my email to council associated with this, I did want to state there are 3 911 specialists in here. Any of these positions that are currently vacant, all departments are currently trying to hire their vacant positions. 911 specialists, there are 3 of them at $41,900. He has some in the pipeline. He does not have anybody signed on the dotted line at the moment. Again, council's meeting last Wednesday, I gave the list at the full dollar amount. Is there any flexibility to only cut one of those, cut 2 of those, instead of cutting all 3 to allow him to have some flexibility? Again,
Or would we have to, like, so if they did cut them?
We would have to come back.
to council. And if that's the case, if it's something like that, John, would you be willing to, like, if, for example, if Lorenzo came to us on a Thursday, but it was the Wednesday after council meeting, would you allow us to
No
put it on?
problem.
And
No
okay.
problem at all.
So if we bring it forward, then it could be a little bit faster.
We want to make that process as easy as possible.
Okay.
And we're just
So-
next door.
Well, I know, but it's only every 2 weeks, though.
So,
Well,
again.
2 weeks,
No, no.
10 working days.
So,
10
again,
working days.
Yeah.
you know, if you said, give us one, you know, and let us take one more off of there instead of having this number be 826,220, could we have it be,
Which number?
the number that Anjali
this
has
sheet.
is third down on the
This sheet
left,
here.
it says
Here.
826,220. If that could be
Second one
784,320, that would give at least one of those vacant positions before we would have to come to council for emergency services.
So the 826,220 would be what?
784,320.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then that would change the FICA number to be 60,000 flat.
Where is it now?
It's 84. I'm not sure how she came up with that number, because FICA is 7.65%.
Yes.
Okay, so it's 60, okay.
So it would be 60,000 flat in that number.
Okay.
And then you could actually add an additional, I don't see it on her list.
That's
That's why I'm saying.
this one, yeah.
You could add an additional 14,768, $295,000 as cuts for cutting the health insurance aspect. So you would have 784 as a reduction, $60,000 as a reduction, and $295,000, $390.
Can you email me that figure for the health insurance?
Yeah, I was emailed this morning.
Was that a per person?
It was on
rate?
it was on the vacancy report on the left-hand, on the far right.
Okay, all the way over. It didn't print on mine.
Yeah,
Okay.
the one that I sent this morning had the health insurance number, but I would
Okay.
be removing one of them because it's 310 currently, so it would be 295, 390. So you would get 784, 60, 295, 390. We would have to work on, I would have to look at that 217 number.
Can you back up? Is that 295, 390 in addition to Angelie's 15,563?
That's the, yeah, because that 15,000 relates to the executive positions.
So it's 295 plus the 15.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Yes.
And just to back up a little bit on these emergency services, are we doing a percentage thing or just not cutting those 3 or cutting, just not?
We're just
cutting
we're
one?
gonna remove one from the list.
Okay.
So instead of having 3 being cut, we're going to cut 2 and let him have one of the vacancies remain. And then if he is able to hire more than that, we will come back to council to ask for them to be added back in the budget.
Is it okay if I email this to Pam and we work back and forth to come to it? Okay.
Yeah, certainly.
So then I am in agreement with the calculation of the 59,238 and the 15,563. I'm in agreement with, obviously, the number because I proposed the complete $2.7 million cut. Thank you for removing the community promotions because the majority of that is contractual obligations, shorebirds and the legislative breakfast that the executive pays for.
The only concern we have is the Civic Center elevator, so it's fine that it's cut, but Steve is saying he might be coming to you for a budget amendment to get it fixed. So we may be in front of you again for it, so just FYI, because it's...
Civic Center flooring and airport
It was fine,
canopy.
yeah.
So I would like to work with Anjali to come to an agreement on the 217 so that we come to the same number associated with that. That would be that column on the left. The column on the right, again, the revenue number is, the reduction is too high, but we do have to reduce the 231.
Do you know why there was a difference in the revenue adjustments between your two numbers?
All I can do is do the calculation as provided, and I can't answer, I could not recreate her number.
I think that I was trying to allocate that revenue amount to, there's 2 different lines on the Exhibit A. And it could be partly my misunderstanding about how property tax gets allocated to the different lines on that Exhibit A of the different revenues.
Okay.
So I think working with Pam going forward will help smooth out any misunderstandings I have as the new IA, internal auditor.
So I am comfortable that the 17 is the appropriate number. I'm comfortable with the 231. The tax rate will have to be amended for personal property as well as real property because personal property will no longer be 2.5 times or less than 2.5 times.
When you say amended, are you talking about the resolution?
The resolution,
Okay.
because in the resolution, we have always been stating it's staying the same at 21719. It is not going to be able to stay the same. It's going to have to go to 2117.
Yeah, so just so council knows, there's a whole separate resolution that adopts the tax rate. It'll be your real property tax rate, personal property. Pam, help me out. Is it the semi-annual that's also included in that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And
Anything
that
else?
doesn't change.
Okay.
That percentage does not change. On your budget additions, again,
What is this, I wonder, like, I guess now, this total will be...
so I will have to
Yeah.
work on
Why
that.
don't you know it right now?
I am an accountant who does not do math in her head. I do math on pen and paper and calculator and computer. I am really good at that. I am not in my head. The 825, again, my suggestion is it provides savings if we did it in fiscal '24. If council is absolutely sure they want to do it in fiscal '25, that is what it is. I don't believe the exact.
What kind of savings?
Well, what it is it would be taking from the contingency like we had proposed. And so that 825 would then not have to be spent in fiscal '25.
Comes out of the total.
It would come off of this list, and so you would have that 825 to spend on something else.
Or not,
Or not, yes.
at all.
So I recommend that in our balancing, we allow the sheriff's department salary and benefit number to balance throughout the whole number. So that then comes down to Fruitland primary. I still, I do not think 10 and 10 is the right number. I think I we could do 5 and 15. It's actually going to be $5,500,000 because they need $20,500,000. We've been saying 5 and 15, but we have to remember there's $500,000 there. The number needs to be $20,500,000 in total. I would say 5 and 15, 5.5 and 15. I will say whatever we do on that does create an interest change in how much interest we have. But we also, if we borrow less, we also have to reduce our interest income. So at 10 and 10, we would reduce our interest paid by $350,000, but we have to reduce our interest income by $500,000, which is a $150,000 hit to the budget. We would have to reduce our budget by $150,000 for that.
So are you saying that's from what we've been earning in income?
Yes.
But I didn't think we could get a number on that. I asked Angie, and we had no idea what we're earning on interest.
We're earning about 5%.
I know that, but what are we earning per month? I mean, don't you get a monthly statement?
We do, but what I couldn't tell Angie was how much that interest income for 2024 is offsetting any other shortfall in revenue. You can't look at 2020, you can't look at one line item right now in our 2024 budget and say, well, that line item is over, because we still have, for income tax, we still have May, June, July, and August to collect. May and June are big months. So I don't yet know if income tax, I'm estimating income tax is going to make budget, but I still have 4 months of collections on that. We still have collections on our, because we have a tax sale coming up, we still have collections on our real property taxes. We still have collections on other items from other entities. And so I can't look at one line item on the revenue side and say we have this much more and that's going to drop to the bottom line. You have to look at the budget as a whole, and at this moment, we have too much variability to look at that. But there's nothing currently projecting that says I'm not going to make budget, but there's nothing that I'm willing to state saying that we're going to be over budget on the revenue side or under budget significantly on the expense side. That's going to offset the $19 million that we've already stated that we're going to spend out of fund balance.
So you're saying we should borrow 15 million now? 15?
I still would prefer borrowing the whole thing, but if we're looking for a compromise, I would be willing to borrow 15 million and do $5.5 million out of fund balance.
So all this 20 million that we've been talking about for the past month or so is now 20,500,000, or has it always been?
It's always been $20,500,000. We've always just been rounding it to $20 million. It's always been $20,500,000.
I find it interesting we round to $500,000. That's kind of, I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing you. I just find it interesting that we've got that much money that we can just round $500,000.
It's been 20 million. It's been in the list as 20,500,000 the whole time. I will say that if we borrow the 15 and 5, then we will reduce our interest expense to $525,000 on the expense side. So there would be $175,000 of expense savings, but we'd have $250,000 of revenue savings. So there would be a $75,000 cut that we would still have to take.
So for every million, what's the number? I don't feel like doing the math.
I can do the math, but it's basically, I'm just doing the ratio. If you tell me another number, I can do you a ratio.
All right.
Because I'm good at ratios.
Can you repeat that? I didn't quite absorb it.
Okay, so we have budgeted $700,000 of interest expense for a $20,500,000 debt borrowing. Actually, $20,700,000, because we have contingency in there as well, because we have to pay. It's technically borrowing $20,750,000. I so we have $700,000 of interest expense, and we have interest income on that. If we are going to only borrow $15 million, we would have a $525,000 interest expense, but we would have to reduce our interest income by $250,000. So we'd reduce our expense by 175, we'd reduce our revenue by 250. That's a net more reduction of $75,000. If we did 10 and 10, again, with the other things I'm throwing in there, but it would be $350,000 of interest expense and $500,000 of interest income lost. So $150,000 of net further reductions we would have to take to balance this number, or not further reductions, it would offset the reductions that we had already taken. So I need council to be aware that it's not just reducing the expense side, we do have to reduce the revenue side by not having that money sitting there earning interest income for us.
Right, and I think you're also maybe overlooking the fact that if we do the pay-go as opposed to the bonding, you have that money, even that 20 million, it's not like that automatically gets taken out and you're losing your interest on it. You're accumulating that interest as well.
And that's what I'm saying is that's why if we no longer have 20 million in the bank and we only have 10 or 15, that's why I'm reducing the revenue side. I like the number closer to a $50 million fund balance for us as a county versus a mid-40s fund balance. Again, I would prefer to stay where we are. I understand council is not at that point. I'm requesting a 5 and 15 versus a 10 and a 5.5 and 15.
5.5 borrowed?
No, 5.5
Pay-go.
pay-go, because the original pay-go in the budget was $500,000. So I'm saying, okay, well, we'll shift the $20 million of debt to 5 more of pay-go and 15, because to keep their project cash flowed appropriately, they always needed $500,000 of pay-go. So the capital budget that was presented to council was $500,000 of pay-go and $20 million of debt.
Do we know when we would have to give that money out of our account? 5 months from now, 8 months from now?
It would probably be closer. So the first time we would start making any potential draws out of that account. Now, so the first thing that they would probably use is the pay-go, is the 5.5. The 15 on the debt would sit there probably more towards the end of the fiscal year, if not carried into the next fiscal year, because of they historically try to spend the state's money because they know we have promised our money and we have never pulled it back. The state, you want to draw down their money so that it doesn't go away. And so the first money they're going to tap is the state's. But to be able to go under contract, they need us to commit to the money that we're saying that we're going to commit.
So where I was going with that, because you know my position, take 20 million out of the pay-go. If it's not going to be removed out of there for 8 months, 9 months, and we're
not
going to
be able
continue to draw interest on that money, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, but the problem is what happens is on our balance sheet to the Wall Street, that money is no longer available to you if you have an emergency, because you have now committed it elsewhere. It is no.
But we've got the rest of the money in the pay-go,
Yeah,
which
but,
is what? 30, what, I mean, what's the numbers?
yeah, but you would, if you took additional $20 million out of pay-go, you would leave us with a fund balance in the 30s. And that is not a fund balance that I recommend us to be at. That is not a fund balance. I talked with Davenport, who is our financial advisor. That is not a fund balance that they recommend that we be at.
Because it could potentially affect our bond rating or the amount of money
Correct.
that we would get.
Well, there's a lot of things that could potentially
But it's
affect our
also,
bond rating.
as long as it's not taken out, it's refunding our fund balance. It's,
Right.
Well, but
That was my point.
the minute we say it's pay-go, It now moves from an unrestricted category to a committed category. So it is no longer available to us for anything.
You can't draw interest on that money?
We can draw interest, but we can't use it if we
Well, I
have an
understand
issue.
that,
Doesn't matter.
But what
But
about
that's
the
a
Drawing
big-
interest.
Wait a minute, let me finish. What about the money that it's earning? We can use it, correct?
Without a budget amendment, no.
Well, I know that. You have to have a budget amendment, but it goes back into the fund, not added on to that 20 or that 15 million or whatever. Correct?
Yes, it is not a position that I recommend you take.
No. That's not the question, but anyway.
So the question is whether or not we want to go with the 10.5, 10, or do we want to go with the 5.5, 15?
I'm out for the 5.5 and 15.
Jeff,
I want 10 and 10.
Joe?
Where you got Shane on the 10 and 10?
I mean, I wanted the 20, but I said last meeting that I would compromise if needed be, but my understanding from Mr. Benson, his opinion was that we had the authority to take that 20 million out of pay-go.
Well, we would be assuming that either with 20 or we would be assuming that with 10-10. So what the question is, I think Joe's asking if you will go with it, if you would agree with the 10-10.
Yeah, I said I would.
Okay, Joe?
By the way, Shane's opinion didn't have any basis in my mind. I was just wondering where he was at.
I thought I was just trying to get you an answer. You do what you got to.
I even wanted to see what I was going to say. Ain't my first rodeo.
Okay, let me ask this. Last week, you said that we didn't have the authority to do this.
I still don't believe you have the
still don't.
authority.
I don't want to get into the weeds on that, Joe. I just want to, I think we're coming
have
to
two different
we're coming to a,
attorneys.
I think we're coming to a compromise on that.
Doesn't matter if we
don't
come to a
believe 10 and
compromise
10 is a
Somebody
compromise.
finds out we can't do it, but I understand Mr. Benson says we can. So yeah, I'll do the 10 and 10.
Josh?
Just for clarity, it'd be nice to be able to say, okay, here, option A is 10-10, here's the net benefit, here's the amount of money, in which case you think we'll probably lose money, 125,000 or whatever it might be. Or if it's option B there, the 5.5, and then how much we're going to gain or how much but that being said, I generally know your thoughts are on that. I'm okay with 5.5 if that's really what Pam feels strongly. I hear very clearly how strong and passionate you rightfully are on this, and you have a lot of experience and understanding on that. So I respectfully, I will go along with that for those reasons. But if there's other issues.
I will state one other thing. The executive and administration is willing to not fight the concept of 5.5 versus 10.
That's
That
not
is
where
no.
we're
That is a because we have an attorney's opinion saying that you have no authority to switch it from 20 million to 10 million.
5 million is not going to destroy Wicomico County if we have it in reserves or whether we bond it. It is
$5
not
million
worth.
could impact what we say at Wall Street, what will be said at
Yeah,
Wall Street.
and if we go into a legal battle, believe me, that'll also affect it when you go to Wall Street because they
Well, we
read
won't go to
all of
Wall
our
Street if we're in
newspapers. They read everything that happens in
We're in a legal
Wicomico
battle,
County.
we're not going to Wall Street.
And so this project.
You're right. You're
And it would
exactly
be put on
correct.
hold.
So let me ask you a question.
Let's finish this first. James, where were you on this?
Wake up, James.
Pam, Pam, you recommend that we borrow the whole thing? Or the 15.
I recommend that we borrow the whole thing if there is a willingness on council to compromise. Administration would agree to 5.5 and 15 and not protest the concept of adding to the budget.
I'm fine with your recommendation.
Okay, and I'd like to do the 10-10. So that's what we're going to try to do. We started out with 20, we're at 10-10, so.
So we got that
Let's get a
settled.
school
Now I've got a
bill.
question. You're saying that you have a legal opinion saying that we can't take the money out for this, but yet you're willing to do it.
No, we're not.
So
We
what
don't
we're-
want 10,
so-
10
You
at all.
just said you were. You said you
No,
were
so
willing to
what-
go with the 5 and 10.
Again,
15 and 5.
10 and 5 or whatever, yeah.
So, again, since I have sat in this chair and I have been in this county, administration has come back to council with additions. This would be an administration addition to take it up to $5.5 million because you don't have $5.5 million of cuts. So your total number would go higher than the number that is currently listed in the budget. But administration would be willing to do that because they're willing to do 5.5. We have to go back and talk and say whether or not we are willing to do $10 million of additions, and I don't have that answer at this moment. I'd even be willing to consider if you split the difference between 10 and 5. I don't like 10. That number is too
So this
large.
council,
Do you like it better than 20?
I
No, we don't like either, because it's fiscally irresponsible, says Davenport, not 7 people who don't have finance degrees.
You
Like,
have
it's
that
no
in writing?
offense, but we're listening
Is
to
that
our
in writing?
financial
We haven't
advisors
seen
in
that
New
from
York.
Davenport. We haven't seen any of that.
Excuse me,
Good.
Am I allowed to actually talk with our financial advisors and you doubt that I'm bringing you that information?
no, I didn't, I just asked you.
It's not in writing.
Mrs.
It is
Giordano,
from-
you didn't say it, Mrs. Giordano said
I did.
it. Do you have that in writing, what you just said?
No, but I'll get it in writing
Okay.
if you want us to say it, yeah. I mean, there's lots of decisions that have been made here recently that Davenport is very concerned about our credit rating and bond rating. This is just one of them. So, unstable government is another one that they're a little concerned about.
Yeah, we all are, very much so.
No.
That's why we try to keep things out of the newspaper. That's why we try to keep things off of social media, because we're very concerned
Well,
about that.
you did interviews just like I did,
Go
John.
ahead. I'm not talking about interviews.
I just
Well,
want to
that's
clarify that Mr.
media.
Wilbur's opinion was that it's because council amended the CIP. Is that,
So the state law that is pointed to states that if the executive did not fund, council can put it back. Executive funded.
that's its position?
That is his position. The
Okay.
That's what
executive
it stated.
funded.
Okay.
Thus, there is nothing for the council to put back in.
Because the school was funded.
So, again, we're willing to compromise and not create anything, and I would prefer, again, I have stated all along, I prefer to bond the whole thing. I think that $5.5 million is a better number than taking us to the mid-40s. Keeping us closer to that $50 million number is a much better number than a number in the mid-40s.
It's the
we sat here and
mid-40s.
compromised with you on some of these raises and different things.
And my compromise back to you was to, again, I still think $20 million is the right number to borrow. So again, my compromise back to you is, can we cut that borrowing number, or can we cut the fund balance number to 5.5? That's another compromise that I have asked from council.
Based on our auditor's recommendations on what we should have in reserves, what would that number be?
So, Charles?
4 times 12.5 million, we'll call it 50 million.
So they're recommending that we be around $50 million. And so, again, the 5.5 and the 15 keep us closer to the number recommended by our auditors versus the number that we would go to if we did 10 and 10 and a half.
Can I,
I thought there was a high point and a low point. Didn't we discuss that?
I think high point is better than low point.
Well, I'm just saying, this is where you don't want
So-
to be below this. This is the best.
So they're, anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So he's saying 4 months is $50 million. So we're going low-mid at 4 months at $50 million. So again, if we did low, you're talking $36 to $38 million. I would prefer to be closer to that $50 million number, which is getting closer to our midpoint than the low point.
James, you had a question?
so the school's going to get their $20 million, regardless of this conversation.
Unless it goes to a legal battle.
Right, nobody wants a
And we
legal
don't wanna
battle,
do that.
right?
Correct.
So we can
that would be
avoid,
the only way.
I'm just saying, if we can all just avoid this legal battle, and I mean, I don't see what's wrong with the 5 and 15. The 10 and 10's one thing, it puts us more in a little bit of a strain. I just, if we have to go to 7.5 and 13, would that be killer, or?
It it would be.
I mean, I'm just trying to find a happy medium, you know?
Again, the maximum number that I would is 7.5.
Okay.
Again, that's the maximum number I feel comfortable with as your financial advisor and your financial director, is that, and that is not where I'm most comfortable. But the other piece is if 24 comes in and we don't end up using all $19 million, then we have the opportunity, because we're going to have to come back to keep Fruitland on track. We have another $26 million sitting there that we're going to need to borrow or do something with. Next year. So if we did 5.5 and 15 now, and next year we're still in that same $50 million range, or we have actually been able to keep the number a little higher than that, maybe next year we don't have to borrow all $26.5 million and we have some flexibility. But please,
I think it's unconscionable to sit here and threaten a lawsuit based on different strategy for financing
That's-
a
Nobody
school.
threatened a lawsuit.
No,
We just said we
clearly
have two different
threatened
legal
a
opinions.
lawsuit. You want to call it a veiled threat? It was a veiled
Don't put
threat.
words in my mouth. I said we have two different legal opinions. That's what I
I don't think I'm
said.
putting, well, I'm not, no.
Two
no.
different legal opinions.
No, the comment was made that if we don't do 5 and 15, then there's going to be a lawsuit.
I
That's what
never
was said.
said that.
That's not what was said.
All right, then we'll do 10 and 10. Is there a problem?
She does not feel comfortable financially.
No, I
Like,
asked you if that was going to go to litigation.
I said, and I.
We would have to go back and look at
a very-
budget. We
and
still
I
have to
told-
talk to
and I
Mr.
told-
Wilbur.
And I told you earlier.
Anybody else hear that?
That's not a threat of a lawsuit, John.
John.
That's being smart. How can I sit here?
Attorneys are going to help you with the financial circus?
Yes,
I
because
specifically stated the words that I
you have
stated.
him sitting in here. I don't have Mr. Wilbur here.
I'm not talking.
May I finish, John?
Well, I haven't finished yet, Pam, so just hang on one second. I don't see where you're talking about. You're trying to say now that you're using attorneys to help us solve a difference of a financial opinion as far as what we think is the best way to fund a primary school. And I say you never need an attorney to do that.
And I stated in the conversation that we had right here, is I said, I can't answer the question as to whether or not 10 and 10.5 is something that administration is willing to go to in this room today. I can say that we can do 5.5 and 15. Heck, I can say we can do 7.5 and 13.
13.
What legal
But-
advice, go ahead.
But I cannot say in this room today that that 10 and 10.5 is a number that we're willing to go to.
My question would be then, what legal advice are you seeking?
I never said it
if
was
we
legal
choose- I'm
advice. No, I
asking a question. If we're seeking to do a 10.5, 10, what exactly legal advice would you be seeking from your attorney?
I never stated that.
I'm
I did.
asking the
I
executive.
did.
But you're looking at me.
I would talk to Mr. Wilbur just to verify that the council, once again, does not have the ability to do so. And then, once we got that verification, which actually, I don't even think I would need it because we already have it, that he said that you didn't. We just need to look at the finances, John. Like, I'm having a hard time understanding. We're like, please don't spend the money out of the account. We need this money in the account. And you guys are like, just bent on like, no, we're going to spend that money. And your finance director is telling you, don't do that. It's not smart. And so I just want to make sure that you are doing this because you really think this is the smartest financial move, not to just dig your heels in on something that we disagree on.
And we can answer that. It's very clear because we've stated a million times that we don't think it's wise to be bonding money at the highest interest rates in the last 40 years if we have it in reserves and we can use our reserves. There's your answer.
But
And
even
I
though
didn't
we'll do
need-
it next
I did not
year.
need an attorney to tell you
And
that.
on top of that, I have met with 2 accountants just to verify what I was saying, my thoughts, am I looking at this right? And both of them, who I trust both of them, said, absolutely.
So you don't trust your finance directors. That's what I just heard.
I tell you what I'm having trouble with, okay? What we just recently went through when we asked for the, totally lost track, the FOP. what's the word?
Yep.
Collective bargaining?
No, that we were.
Your CBIZ document?
Actuary.
The actuaries that the information that Pam gave you when you went on May 8th?
Wait a minute.
Are we really going to go into that?
Yeah, I was talking.
Okay, like,
Okay.
if we're ready to jump into the CBA conversation?
She's
let him
asking me
finish.
why
Okay.
I
Closed
have.
session, wasn't it?
She's asking me why I have a problem with what I have a problem with. We simply asked for that piece of paper, an actuary. You said you presented it to us. We never got it.
You didn't get a document that had CBIZ logo on it. You had a financial projection done by a 30-year finance director
That's not
with,
what we asked
with
for,
CBIZ actuarial numbers,
That's
period.
not what we asked for. We asked
On
for
May
an
8th, we were,
actuary.
no, you didn't. On May 8th, the email that I got from Ms. Hurley said, we would like a financial projection, which is what you got using actuarial data from CBIZ.
What actuarial data is the question? So I don't want to.
So there were 9 and 10 or 10 actuaries that were done that the
Right.
council is not privy to because it is personal
We don't want
information.
that kind of an
That
actuary. That's
data
not what
was
we're looking
used,
for.
Shane, that data was used to do the projections. That obviously was a miscommunication, me thinking actuarial data from CBIZ, her doing the calculations would have been enough. We have CBIZ working on it now,
Okay.
okay?
Good. Well, we were saying.
Just, I'm
I-
glad you went on record to say we didn't get it.
No, I didn't go on record saying, you did get it. You
What we-
did get
what we
did data that was
we did
used by
not get an
CBIZ. Yes, you did.
actuary.
I really, really.
Yes, you did. Don't put words in my
really
mouth.
detest sitting here.
Period. End.
Yeah, likewise.
Again, you basically stated, in your words, that you have 2 accountants that aren't the finance director for Wicomico County that you trust, and thus you don't trust the finance director. That's what you
That
said.
is not what I said. I never said I didn't trust you.
You
What
just
I
stated
said
that you
was,
trust them.
My position was it was smart to take the 20 million out of our account that we have it in.
And are they governmental accountants, or are they your standard tax accountant? Because governmental accounting is a
at the
whole
end-
lot different.
Let's just go back and look at the 10 and 10. If they want to drain Wicomico County's account, then let them do so. I mean, that's just where I'm at right now. I'm tired of the argument over it. Fruitland's getting built. We didn't want to build it. We wanted it done in '27 because these 2 years we didn't want to borrow. Next year is probably going to be worse depending on what goes on this ballot. So let them do it. If they want to present the instability of the government, then let them do that. I don't understand why we're sitting here trying to protect 7 people who obviously don't need our protection. They don't. They have outside accountants and they have all these outside people that they listen to. And if that's what they want to do, I am telling you it's not smart based on what Davenport said and based on what Pam said. I trust Pam. You all should trust Pam because you all confirmed her. So I'm trusting her judgment. You don't. And so therefore, if we come back with the 10 and 10, then let's just do the 10 and 10. I don't know what else to say. I don't feel comfortable with the number. You don't feel comfortable with the number. But thank goodness these 7 do.
Well, these 7 were also voted in by the citizens of Wicomico County, no different than you yourself. So
Correct.
That's what we're here for, and we have a responsibility. It's a checks and balances, and
Right,
that's
and
why
so
we
do I.
are here. And
I
we
have a
try not to
responsibility for that.
disrespect your office, and we would ask the same courtesy. My position,
my God.
my position is what I said before.
You're just trying to get rid of
Can I
the
finish?
office,
Can I
but
please
you
talk?
respect it. Okay,
So on that note,
let's come.
I have 2 things I'd like to ask
Do the
right
10
now.
and 10.
I need this.
One is that in reference to the actuarial, I think the issue is a concern, Pam, as to whether or not that was an actuarial on 10 or 30, or whether these were independent actuarials on each independent deputy, and whether or not that could truly be extrapolated to 30 deputies. We were trying to get assurances. If you're going to be doing an actuarial for all 29 or 30, that's fine. That's really what we're looking for, which is a common sense approach. In reference to the other, whether you want to agree with it or not, you asked me exactly what the council's opinion was.
Okay.
And I very nicely said to you, we feel that a $20 million bond with the highest interest rates in the last 40 years is probably not the best measure to take. That's
So
not saying
on
that Pam is a bad financial director. It's a difference in strategy, period.
Right, and we had said because it's the highest interest rates in 40 years, we didn't want to do it at all.
Well, you were very, you had no
Adamant.
problem with going to the school and announcing that you were proud to be giving them a $48 million school.
After We had no choice because we knew you were going to add it anyway,
Well,
even though you did it on a CIP as opposed to a budget.
I get what you're saying, but that,
There
it's
was
all
nothing we
good and
could do.
fine. It depends on the
I've tried
circumstances.
to add, just for the record.
Yes.
The council did not add anything to the CIP.
Yes, you did. That was the-
Council passed a resolution.
Bob, stop.
And in the resolution, they said, if you don't add it back in the budget, when you present the budget, we're going to add it.
The only
resolution
and we
is
did add
not law. It is merely the opinion of the council.
The
Period.
resolution that
It
you
would
were
not have
amending.
happened until after.
The resolution that you actually amended was a CIP resolution. It had nothing to do with the budget. It was not a budget resolution. It was a CIP. So you can't say you amended a budget when the resolution on the table was a CIP. If you don't know that difference, oh my goodness.
But
So
the
anyway,
county council cannot legally amend the CIP.
which
by
you
resolution.
did.
You did
not.
last meeting.
You did.
Did not. It was a resolution.
It was a resolution.
It merely told the executive.
Give up.
I know.
I am
Not-
honestly
Can
ready
I-
to walk out the
They-
door.
they
I
have
am
the
ready
right.
to walk out this door
Right.
because this council is so rude.
Mr.
I
President,
don't see where anybody's, Mr. Benson is simply trying to give you
And
his
Mr.
legal
Benson,
opinion.
I have
And-
told him
and
he's
again-
wrong once, and I'll tell him again.
Yeah, I understand that, but
We
it's
just
his legal
disagree
opinion.
with how that is done.
If
So
Mr. Wilbur's here, he could disagree. Yes, Laura.
Pam, can you go over the timeline, like whether council puts in the 20 million as bond or whether it's 10 million as bond? Can you go over the next steps after the budget passes, regardless of what the amount is? What,
The first step will be on the second meeting of June. There will be a bond resolution.
Okay,
That
right
will
there.
be, or not a bond legislation to allow us to have the authority to do the bonding.
Okay.
First reading would be the second meeting of June.
okay, so does council have to approve that?
Yes.
Can we amend that?
You can,
Yes,
you
we
can amend that in the second reading. The second reading would be the second meeting of July.
No, say it was 20 million and council reduced it to 10 million. How does that impact the financial budget?
So I was just trying to figure out, so again, I do not have this document from Anjali. If I use the numbers that I had previously presented, which was about a $4 million net change, plus or minus, we would then be adding and that's assuming, actually, it's more like if council wants to do the 825 out of,
No, say it was 20 million. The way you
but
guys had.
hold on, I've got to, there's still steps. So we're currently at, with the 825, we're at $3.2 million worth of net expense reductions. We then have to amend the amount for how much debt service, and then how much interest income. Again, if it's 10 and 10, you're looking.
But my thought process is if council passes a balanced budget with the 20 million there, and then later they reduce that legislative bill down to 10, I think you've already passed the balanced budget.
Yeah, but the problem is you don't have the $10 million to spend on the, so you don't have the 10 million in PAYGO available for, and they need a commitment from us of 20.5 million. So if all we're going to do is reduce the legislation to 10, we then also have to do a budget amendment to add $10 million to PAYGO.
Okay, that's where I was going, yes.
So the debt number, yes, could change, but whatever the debt number changes, we have to do the corresponding change on the fund balance impact. So we're at about $3 million worth of savings. If we're going to do $10 million worth of borrowing, then you're actually going to be adding $7 million to the budget, and that means that you're going to have about a $200 million, actually, it's going to be 198 plus 7, So you're going to have about a $205 million budget approximately, because you're going to have to add $7 million worth of revenue to pay for the additional $10 million worth of debt. That's assuming you don't spend any of these cuts that you just made on anything else. If you only spend it on doing the debt. So if you want to also do one-time funding and MOE funding, you're now talking $9 million that have to be added.
Mrs. Hurley, I would really like if you could talk to our county accountants, auditors, PCAS, and talk to them again. I know that when Ashley Stern was here, she did give us an exact quote of what the amount was that we needed to keep in reserves. Could you ask her what that number would be, if you don't mind?
Yeah, or I could just go back and look at the minutes.
Well, yeah, you could do that. You could do that.
Yeah. And I can also call her just to clarify.
As a clarification, that would help. Because, I mean, if what Charles is telling us is that we have to keep within the $50 million range, I think we should certainly do that. I really do. I think that we should do that.
You know, I've been listening to all this about whether to borrow or not, and I've never been embroiled in the high end of finances until I came on the council. But you think about going to, say, buy a car. We'll use that. And the banker said, how much money have you got? Well, I've got this amount of money. And he said, well, how much do you owe? Well, I owe this amount. My God, you owe too much money for me to lend you any more. So that's what bothers me about now. And I was in favor of borrowing it to begin with, but I also remember Pam at one time saying that she didn't encourage us to borrow any more money.
I stated that we did not feel that 2025 was the year to do significant borrowing.
Right.
That ship has sailed because council made the decision that we are doing Fruitland Primary. We didn't put Fruitland Primary on. So I have provided the best recommendation that I feel is appropriate, and
So what, I guess if I could finish what I started, I don't know if there's a big difference when it comes to whoever's going to lend you money. There may be some, whether you owe too much money or you have too good of a bond rating or too much money in the bank. I don't know where the balance is. I do know that for a number of years we've always heard we had such a great amount of money in our reserve fund, and Josh has even made the comments, I think, something about coming from the disparity grant. Most of our money in the reserve fund come from the disparity grant, a good portion of it, if you think about the disparity grant over a period of years. I'm going to say this, and I know it's probably going to not make people feel very good, that if we leave a lot of money in our reserve fund, it's just going to give our county government more ability to spend more in the future. Because we went through it rather rapidly this past year. And the reason we went through it really rapidly is because we had so much in there. And we can look back and we can say, council voted for it, which he did. Not all of us voted for everything. Some voted yes and some voted no. You know, that's, but the more that's left in that, reserve fund is just going to give somebody the ability to say, hey, we got it in the reserve fund, we can afford to spend it.
so
And that's,
I'll let
let
you
me finish, please.
Yes.
That's kind of where I'm at as far as, you know, I agree to the 10 and 10. I know we're going to be earning money on interest, and hopefully our income taxes will take our reserve fund back up. But
So may I comment on the one part of your statement? I will say that in my opinion, based on what I have learned sitting in this seat, is that $1 more of debt is not equal to $1 more of fund balance. So if we add $15 million of debt, it is not nearly as severe as taking down $15 million worth of fund balance to the eyes of investors, because of how we sit with our principal and interest policy and how we sit with our debt limit policy. Those two things are still we are still in the very affordable range of that. The range as provided by PKS we are approaching the low end on that range with a 10 and 10 concept. That is going to harm us more in the eyes of Wall Street than having $15 million of debt.
Well, and, sorry, Bunky Luffman, Director of Administration. Unfortunately, the county executive had to leave for a prior engagement. But I wanted to say, Councilman Holloway, I believe, I agree with you on the disparity grant. We were cut, and they said it was formula-driven, about $2 million this year. The state has talked about their budget going into next year and how there's structural deficit. I hope they don't cut it. They might, which is another reason that we probably should keep a good amount of reserve, because we may have to cover, so.
Again, I mean, we've decided on 10-10. That's where we are right now, but I would like to get a report from PKS to let us know if, and to corroborate what Charles is saying, what Pam is saying. Never hurts, and then we can see whether or not we need to make an adjustment to that number. We're not done yet. This is a work session, but if PKS came in here and said, "My God, your reserves need to be 60 million," and I think that would be a rude awakening for us all. So let's see what they have to say for it. Well, it's just a difference in philosophy, Pam. It's not simply questioning your intelligence. I think we have a difference in philosophy. And, you're trying to be concerned about what we have in reserves, and our concern is more, I guess, more immediate, such as, do we borrow money or do we take it from what we have, which is more.
I'm afraid the cascading impact of taking more.
Right.
That is the cascading impact of that when we made legitimate decisions to do what we've done over the last year. And again, 12 and a half times, that is basically our monthly spend. 4 months would take us to $50 million. Again, at this moment, the answer is 10 and a half and 10. On the next thing down, though, I will say, if you're going to do that, then I would recommend that you don't provide anything else to the Board of Education, and you take every bit of the savings that you have just calculated on here and put it and not spend it. Allow us to use that to offset the fund balance number, because every dollar that you spend of these cuts is $1 more of fund balance that we have to use.
Well, and on one other thing, I just wanted to apologize to the council and Laura. When we had the human resources documents, I really thought that HR had already sent that to you. But when me and Donna spoke, I think she walked away from the conversation thinking I gave it to Bunky. He's going to send it, and I walked away from the conversation thinking she was going to send it. So that's my fault, my responsibility. So I'm sorry. I'm glad that you got it today.
Yeah.
Good, thank you, Bunky. We have gone through most of this list. A couple things that haven't discussed. I think the council wants to move forward with the 825 on the volunteer fire and ambulance. We've had a lot of discussion with the chiefs, et cetera, and we think this is probably the best way to go. We're looking at the very bottom of the sheet. The Board of Education was asking for 4.1 MOE, and what is suggested for today is to look at giving $1 million on maintenance of effort and $1 million in one-time only, since they did present a list for one-time only. We figure that also would be a compromise. Some reservation about even $1 million or MOE, but I think we do need to try to bring up the number that we're contributing as far as the cost per pupil. So, any questions or comments? Outside of that, the last thing is we have on the budget cut section about halfway down the corrections building expansion, $2.7 million. We would like to move that into 2026 to give us a chance to evaluate it. As was stated in the work session, it's a project that last year's CIP had at $1.8 million for fiscal year 25. And then when fiscal year 25 came, they wanted 2.7 for the next 2 years. So it would be really good to give us a year for them to come back in again and maybe give us some type of a better breakdown of the outlay and what they're trying to accomplish there.
Your
Yes.
line item on the bond contingency, that $250,000 is really just the cost of us. I can't cut that based on the size of the debt, really. $250,000 is what it's going to cost us to be able to put together a POS and present to New York and pay Davenport and pay New York and I mean, we have to pay Moody's and S&P. We don't get to just go up there and say, give us a rating. That we owe them money. We have to pay potential closing costs. And so reducing that bond contingency is not a number that I would recommend you reduce. It doesn't change the total dollar amount of the borrowing significantly, and it doesn't change what we have. I mean, that's going to be a drop in the bucket associated with the debt. I would recommend you leave that at the $250,000. If we don't spend it, it just becomes money available to, in the debt available to us.
I think Angie's taking notes.
Yeah, and if I can just confirm, I didn't actually reduce anything on Exhibit B or C. Like, I couldn't actually find an expense, like a line item expense for that bond contingency.
That's part of the debt service number.
Yeah, so it doesn't really affect anything by moving it to 250, correct?
No.
Okay, thank you.
And the final thing, I guess, is that we had 3 budget contingencies. One was the Fruitland primary, but that's not a relevant point this time. I think we've said everything we can about that. There is a budget contingency where the council would like the grant administrator reporting to the council and executive.
So positions within the administration are administrative positions, and the grant administrator would be an administrative position and would be a finance position. We have no problems having a quarterly standing meeting with council that the grant administrator would report to council, but having 2 bosses is not a easy and workable, I mean, the line of report needs to be direct to finance, because you're talking about a financial position that is going to be managing and tracking and looking for, but we have no problems coming to council on a quarterly basis. If you want to make that a standing part of a work session, that we report to you what the administrator has found, what the administrator has been working on. I have no problems with that.
I think we had suggested this in line to the same thing as at one point in time. I think we made a big mistake, but at one point in time when the council and the executive both oversaw the law department and the same authority, actually the council had more authority with the law department. We were just trying to create that same type of relationship.
Yeah, but I mean, at least the way the charter is currently written is administrative positions are part of the executive branch. And again, having 2 bosses, I have worked in positions where having 2 bosses, it never works. It is a position that needs to be under finance because it is a financial tracking, and we are going to utilize it for that to make sure we are meeting all of our grant requirements and finding every grant that we can. But administratively, having 2 bosses is not a workable thing, in my opinion.
Noted. The last thing, the third part was funding hold for new jobs until council receives a job. Could you
I think
speak up,
that's
John?
related to the
Sorry, I'm thinking out loud here.
Yeah.
The third one is funding hold for new jobs until council receives those jobs descriptions.
You got that, and that is,
all
I think
done.
that's related to the Schedule E position.
Yeah, that's what it just got emailed to you guys today.
Okay, fine, great.
So, as of right now, I think the only change that I'm aware of on the Schedule E that council has suggested is the two positions in the executive office.
Okay.
And so that is what I am operating under to create the budget packet.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody? I think it's important to stress, Pam, that, we're going to have differences of opinions. We've been doing this a long time, and we're going to have differences of strategy sometime like that. But we have the utmost respect for the job that you do. I don't want you ever doubt that. So no matter how things may play out, maybe we're like children in a family or something where you're going to have back and forth occasionally, but we respect what you 100%. We just may not agree with everything all the time.
It's hard to hear how it is stated from across the table. Because at times, it does feel like an attack on me personally.
Right.
I think we feel attacked occasionally, too.
Excuse me?
I think we feel attacked occasionally.
Yeah, there's a lot of hostility in the room.
Especially when it comes to PAC 14. I watched that interview, or that
Occasionally?
PAC 14 broadcast. That
You're
was
being
very-
kind, Joe.
You attacked this council ruthlessly for 40 minutes, Bunky, you and the county executive, ruthlessly.
Shane? Shane?
Pam, I want to reiterate what I said, not to you, to both of you, was I wasn't questioning you. I went and spoke to two people about what my theories were, if I was right or not. Wasn't about you. It was about me. I believed to be right, and they confirmed it. Wasn't about you. I wanted a difference of opinion.
I think it's kind of like when you go to the doctor and you don't like the news that you get a second opinion. That's all.
Mr. President?
Yes.
On the Salisbury Fire, or not Salisbury Fire, but the volunteer fire ambulance, did the county executive decide to actually fund that amount?
She's fine with the 825 being in there.
She is, okay, good.
Yeah, on the million, I honestly, since this is the first time I've seen
Okay.
those numbers.
Right.
I have not had an opportunity to say and talk to her at all about that. Again, as I stated, just be aware if we go down the path at the 10.5 and 10, and this 2 million as well, you are
1 million.
using up all of the funding savings on that, which means then one night you're going to literally basically be doing a full $10 million worth of pay-go
Right.
addition, which will take your budget to about 208.
Okay.
Pam, can I ask a question off the subject? Are we done? Is that all right, John?
I have no idea what you're going to ask. That is
Well,
a
it's
loaded
about,
question.
it's
Hold on,
about
just keep
accounting,
going.
and we've talked about this before. The automobiles, you've created a separate category in the budget for the lease.
Correct.
Okay, and it's about 950,000.
That's on the expense side. There is a revenue that offsets that.
Yeah. So why is it that they're not assigned to each department like we did before they were leased, and like we changed the benefit packages at one time because they were done as a line item, and then to get a correct accounting of every department, we changed the benefits to the departments.
So I believe I've stated this before. The decision was made that it was for tracking purposes due to it has been done by fund. So
Is what now? I'm sorry.
been done by fund. So
Yeah.
airport has theirs. Rec and Parks has theirs. Tourism, Civic Center, Solid Waste, they have theirs. The general fund, we don't allocate out finance. Finance is an overhead department. We don't allocate out purchasing. We don't allocate out law within the general fund because those are all supporting functions In some governments, I am not suggesting this because we do not have the financial, and this is partly also because of financial staff. Some governments create something called an internal services fund, which would have the executive office, which would have purchasing, HR, law, all of the administrative functions in one department, and 100% of those expenses then would be allocated out to the other departments or to the other funds. We don't do that. We do not have the accounting staff to handle that. We're not big enough. We are not a large enough and robust enough financial accounting staff to be able to handle creating an internal services fund, so it's not something I recommend. We have taken it to the level that we feel still provides counsel because then I'd also have to track the revenue by department. And so it makes it much cleaner that we have basically one revenue, one expense that relates to the general fund, and that has been the financial decision that has been made.
But we track revenue like from Rec and Parks and from other departments also. But when we're doing this, I mean, what bothers me about it doesn't give a true cost of a department. And I understand what you're saying about the law department and all that. It really doesn't give the true cost as far as what a department is using. And I'll use Parks and Rec and Parks as an example. They have a huge fleet compared to some of the other departments.
But all of their cost is allocated to them.
Yeah. So, but what I'm saying, you've got that in the 950, correct?
No.
They're not in the 950. So them in the sheriff's office is not in the 950. Okay.
So
you separate them out then?
Well, because they're a separate fund.
Yeah.
They are a separate fund. So if it is in a separate fund, so as I was stating earlier, airport vehicles, rec and park vehicles, tourism vehicles, civic center vehicles, solid waste vehicles, all of those go in their individual fund.
Right.
So if you look at the detail, it has an expense account for that, and they have a revenue if they have any sales that are potentially happening. We have made, for accounting purposes' sake, the decision that the general fund, exclusive of the very specific type of vehicle for the sheriff's department, are accounted for in the leased vehicles line item.
The other thing is, when we went with the lease vehicle program, we were told that we would be decreasing greatly the maintenance issues with vehicles. And I noticed we're still doing like $170,000 a year in maintenance at the sheriff's department. Is there...
It's, we...
And it has dropped some since '23, but you would think that as many vehicles...
It's dropped some, but you also have to understand there's also been inflation in that number. In the cost to maintain a vehicle has gone up.
I thought wasn't the maintenance done by the leasing company?
Certain maintenance is, certain maintenance is not. And again, we still don't have 100%, we don't have a fleet that is 1 and 2 years old.
100%, I understand that.
So, some of, if we, and I did this at one point in time, I have not done it since I have moved over to the position I'm in now, but we looked at Rec and Parks, how much some of the older vehicles were costing us. And you will find that it's the oldest vehicles that, are costing the most money. So again, yes, the number may not have dropped as much as what we have, but the age of our fleet has significantly decreased. And the maintenance repairs that we're doing primarily are on the older vehicles.
The only hypothetical I would give you is, let's say, a citizen comes to us and say, my God, I see county vehicles all over the place. And we find out that there's one department that has like 10 vehicles and they're giving vehicles to everybody, not just the department, but everybody has vehicles. The council might look at that and say, God, that department really should only have 5 vehicles instead of 10. How the heck do we cut it if we're dealing with a $935,000 gross general amount?
So again, the vehicles that we have relate to positions that need to be on the road. I mean, finance doesn't have a vehicle. If we ever need one, we borrow the fleet vehicle. If a department has a position that needs to be on the road, that is the position that has a vehicle. It may or may not be a take-home vehicle.
Right.
A lot of these vehicles go park at the facility for the night, and somebody drives in, picks up their car and, goes home, or, sorry, picks up their personal vehicle and goes home, or comes to the facility and picks up their work vehicle and does their job for the day, and then park it again and return.
I'm sure there's a justification for all that. I get it. But I was just using the hypothetical that if we really felt like we wanted to cut a department back to maybe 3 vehicles instead of 6, how the heck do you do it?
Well, I think you would have to literally look at every position and every vehicle and go, okay, what does that vehicle do? And is that vehicle assigned to the building inspector who's out on the road 75% of the time? Or is that vehicle assigned to, I don't know, an underwater basket weaver who doesn't need it? I'm not aware of any vehicles, for the most part, that we're leasing. Yes, there are times when, we bought a box truck for the Civic Center to be able to move stuff, and I believe we're leasing that vehicle. But that has made their lives so much easier to do their job that it was an appropriate purchase, and it replaced a vehicle that wasn't as effective for that position. So I'm not aware that the fleet has significantly grown. What I am aware of is our fleet age has gotten better since we've implemented this program.
We appreciate that. Any other questions? Yes, Jeff?
I got 2 things. So with the vehicles, you said solid waste is kind of on its own?
They are their own fund.
So like solid waste and roads and landfill, they shouldn't be moving vehicles between them, right?
So if there is a long-term move, then there is a transfer of assets. So we have the ability, and it does happen. It is rare, because most of the time when you're buying a piece of equipment for, again, I know that for Rec and Parks, the roads vehicles come in to bring the dirt in, but we pay a fee from Rec and Parks, actually from the Civic Center, to roads for them to spend their time and energy. We pay those overtime hours out of that event. So if they were transferring a piece of equipment for us to be able to do that once a year and it sat in our back parking lot for the year, then that vehicle would be transferred. But for that period of time that they're doing a specialized service, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's for the rodeo and the monster trucks.
Yeah. So when they bring the dirt in, there is specific times, but again, we have transferred assets between departments, but most of the time, those departments need the asset that they have.
And I think there's a provision that says that council has to be notified if the asset is valued at a certain amount.
I'm not aware of any recent transfers.
Go ahead, sorry.
Just one more. The community promotions, I see, the cut was removed, that's fine. But I saw 2 of them in there. The executive administration has one in their budget, and then there's a separate line item.
So there's 2 departments. There's Department 5, which is the executive, and then there's community promotions. And what comes out of the community promotions line, which was the $14,000 that was proposed as the cut, which is Department 06, not fund. Department 06, that is primarily made up of 2 things. We have a contractual obligation. I think I sent this to council. I'm assuming it got forwarded. A contractual obligation to do an offset related to electric with Shorebirds, because the concession agreement between Shorebirds and the county, basically, Shorebirds wants the rate that the county gets on our electric, but they aren't allowed to be on our electric rates because the electric is in their name. So in our agreement, we give them that savings each year. And that number, because of pluses and minuses of the overall agreement, has started to become a payment out to them versus, because they pay us an amount for amusement tax. But the net number, because of the difference between what they can get as a rate and what we can get as a rate, has become larger, and thus that's where we've been paying that number out of. The second piece is, again, the legislative breakfast, which is a community event type thing, and so that has been coming out of community promotions. And that is it was about $9,000 for the Shorebirds and a couple $1,000s that we paid to the Civic Center for them to provide that service of the legislative breakfast.
Thank you.
Any other question? No?
I do have one. Josh, go ahead.
I just got one comment. You go ahead.
I was just going to ask Pam about the budget amendments. I can start typing them up. I think we're waiting on one more number at least. That was the 5% cap.
So what I have historically done is taken the schedules that are in the budget and shown the differences on that. And that is what then becomes the attachment, because those changes are the attachment.
Okay, so we would just say we're going to amend the Exhibit E,
Yes.
F, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, because that's what we have done every year. So
Okay.
what has been provided as the budget per se has in the past then had there's a column that says council executive changes, because it's both sometimes, and then adopted. I will leave it as proposed until it's adopted, and then I change that last column to say adopted, and that then becomes the published budget. But basically, all we have done since I've taken this role is attach those adjusted documents.
Okay, so I'll type it up, have you look at it if you have any
I wouldn't
concerns.
bother trying to do each line item, because this will show each of those.
Okay.
Josh?
I just wanted to note the conversation was asked before earlier where the PKS talked about a fund balance. That was from the March 5th meeting, 2024, page 7, in case you want to send that around or anything. But that's, they said, of course, no less than 60 to 90 days, which would be 24 to 37 million. We were talking then about a $74 million budget, so literally twice the 90-day. Now, that being said, that's the GFO, whatever.
GFOA.
Yeah, that's their recommendation. Of course, we have a revenue cap. We have other issues that are well documented. So, but nonetheless, just wanted to point that out in case you want to share that around. March 5th, 2024, page
So
7.
they were saying, how much was,
They said no less than 60 to 90 days. So
and that was how much money's?
90 days would be 37 million.
Uh-huh.
So we are, at that point in time, we're talking about 74 million, which was literally doubled 37 million. But we've since.
So if we did the 20 million pay-go. We'd
still be all right.
We'd still be all
No,
right.
you'd be under,
A little bit under, yeah.
because you would be at 33.
Yeah.
But you would be also gaining interest from the money,
Yeah, but we budget for
yeah.
interest.
So
So the budget, it's not found, if we're budgeting for interest, it's not found money. It's money that we've already budgeted for, so it's not like it's going to grow our bottom line.
Did you have anything?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, at the end of the fiscal year, like the end of fiscal year '24, when the departments don't spend all of their money, does that then return to the general fund?
So that, yes, what happens is that we, each of those line items, those savings, or if there's not savings, that all becomes a net number. But again, where we have in the past had a $5 to $10 million use of fund balance, we're going to have a $19 million use of fund balance that we're going to have to cover in this 24 results. I do not expect us to have $19 million worth of windfalls to make it so that we don't use that $19 million. I expect us to be in a number that has us using fund balance. I don't know that number yet because we did budget for interest income and we increased our income tax number. And so each year we've been chipping away at those windfalls that we had a couple years ago that and so those windfalls aren't there anymore.
Yeah. Sorry, well, we want to wrap this up. June 4th is our first county council meeting, legislative session of the month. So we do have to pass the budget at that point in time because our second meeting will be the 18th, which is beyond the deadline of the 15th. So I'm going to hope that on the 4th, we'll be able to, outside of trying to hold a special work session, after talking maybe between Angie and Pam and Laura, trying to evaluate exactly whether we can pull that off on the 4th and come up with, the legislative session and to do all the work under discussion before we vote, okay? So if anyone determines the fact that, well, maybe we should have a work session prior to the meeting or, at some point in time, then the council will have to be ready to do that. But we're trying to make sure we squeeze all this into the 4th during discussion.
Mr. President, just for my clarification, there was a discussion about possibly having a closed work session to deal with personnel.
Yes.
Based on what happened here today, is that not needed now?
Right, Bob, yes, exactly. I think we've got that ironed out.
And then, one other question, the salaries of 60,000 or less or some sort of floor, is that something that's still to be determined or?
Yeah, I think that's something that we're going to, because that spreadsheet hasn't gotten out to the members of the council as of yet. So I think we're going to have to do that and kind of like, get a feel for how that might play out.
So I'll email it, and you all already have a physical copy, but I'll email
That was the discussion we had earlier on gauging that if, if you have an increase, it's 12% on employees that are earning, let's say, 50,000 or let's just say 40,000 or less, whether we should allow that to take place simply because we recognize that, you are trying to raise
I don't remember
monies.
hearing one way or the other. Are you okay with midpoint for vacant positions that aren't being cut? Which has been the policy for the last couple of years to allow flexibility in hiring.
That's what's proposed currently in the budget.
Yes, but those percentages make it look like, there isn't somebody in that position that's going to get a 12% raise. It gives us flexibility to be able to hire between the low end of the range and the midpoint of the range for the qualified candidate that we would want to bring in.
Is that acceptable?
We've done it.
We're okay with that? All right.
That's the ones you noted on here, right?
Yes,
Put it-
that's the ones I noted on there that say mid, or vacant, midpoint, something like that.
Okay, so you'll have to give that to Angie as well.
She has that.
Okay, good.
Just to confirm then, if the position's been vacant for 2 years, it's still not being funded or?
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. I just, for the ones that have been vacant less than 2 years, I would like them funded at midpoint to allow for hiring.
Flexibility. Right. Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second. All those in favor? All right. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Bunky.
Thank you, Pam.
Appreciate it.
Thank